Tim, and welcome to the show. To say Stevie Nicks was an icon of rock and roll or any type of music, I think is a gross understatement. She's a person that's dedicated her life to style, to music, to writing songs. And I just don't think there's anybody else quite like her. So today we're going to check out some of the haunts and homes and locations, some secret, some not so secret, that I think shaped her music. So without further ado, let's get to it. So now we find ourselves right on the border of Pasadena and Altadena at what used to be Mickey's Tavern. And this was owned by the Nicks family in the 50s. So when Stevie was still a little girl, and I'm talking kindergarten age, she cut her teeth singing harmony with her paternal grandfather, A.J. Nicks. And A.J. Nicks was somewhat of a failed country music guy who at 60 years old was still trying to make it. Stevie and A.J. would actually get up for the patrons and do a few songs. And they were getting bigger and bigger responses, and A.J. had schemed to take Stevie on the road with him and actually do shows. But Stevie's mother, Barbara, put the kibosh on that. No little girl of hers was going on the road with her grandfather. But I think the seeds of performing were planted right here. So now we find ourselves about 10 years and 10 miles down the road in the LA suburb of Arcadia. This is where Stevie went to high school for 10th and 11th grades. And it's also where she first got her Goya guitar and became a member of the folk rock trio Changing Times, right here, Arcadia High. So now we're just a little farther up the road here in Arcadia in this bucolic neighborhood. And this was the home of the Nicks family. And this is where Stevie first started writing songs. She wrote her first song, I've Loved and I've Lost, and I'm Sad But Not Blue. She wrote it right here. They only lived here a couple years, and her father got relocated again, and they moved up to Northern California to Menlo Park, where she finished her high school years. And she met a very important person in her life there, 1 year her junior, and it was Lindsey Buckingham. So back before Fleetwood Mac, Stevie made ends meet for her and Lindsey by working as a waitress and a server at several restaurants, the Copper Penny and Clementine's, which are now defunct, and right here at Bob's Big Boy. The routine for her and Lindsey Buckingham was Stevie would work lunch shift while Lindsey stayed home writing music and practicing. And I know that's a fairly one-sided relationship on first look, but even back then, Stevie was a person that liked to stay busy and keep her eyes on the prize, and she obviously could see the big picture more clearly than others. So even after becoming a official member of Fleetwood Mac, Stevie gave her 2-week notice and worked to the end of it. She felt that she had an obligation to the people she worked with, and I think that example of her work ethic really says a lot about Stevie Nicks. Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham first came down from San Francisco to record some demos with up-and-coming producer Keith Olsen and their band Fritz right here at Sound City. You probably know that this studio is where records like Damn the Torpedoes by Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers and Nevermind by Nirvana were recorded, but in its early days it was also where Stevie and Lindsey recorded their debut album, Buckingham-Nicks. It was a great sounding album, but it just couldn't find its traction. And not long after its release in 1973, they were unceremoniously dropped by their record company. So in late 1974, Mick Fleetwood found himself at Sound City Studios. He was there to check it out to see if it might be a place that Fleetwood Mac would like to record an album. It was a relatively new studio, so Keith Olsen played him some material that had been done there, including Buckingham-Nicks. And Mick was so impressed by it that a couple of days later, after he found himself short one guitar player because Bob Welsh had quit Fleetwood Mac, he called Keith Olsen up and wondered if Lindsey Buckingham might be available and interested in joining Fleetwood Mac. And Keith Olsen told him that, well, you know, it's going to be a package deal because where Lindsey goes, so does Stevie. So without so much as an audition or a meeting, he was going to hire them. And that leads us to our next place. So here we are on 3rd Street in Los Angeles, and we're at El Carmen Restaurant. And this place has been here forever. And in January 1975, the significance of this place is that it's where the Lindsey Buckingham, Stevie Nicks version of Fleetwood Mac first laid eyes on the original Fleetwood Mac. And it happened right here. So let's go check it out. Mick lived right up the road on Kirkwood in Laurel Canyon, and Christine and John McVie drove in from Malibu, but Stevie had just gotten off work and was still dressed in her waitress garb. Now, even though it was Lindsey's guitar playing that they needed, Mick Fleetwood was intrigued by Stevie's voice and charisma. It reminded him of French diva Edith Piaf. Privately, Lindsey Buckingham was having some second thoughts about joining Fleetwood Mac. But as Stevie said in her own words, if we do, I won't have to be an effing waitress anymore. So I think the big concern with Mick Fleetwood was, would Stevie Nicks gel with Christine McVie and vice versa? But after a few pitchers of margaritas, they were vibing just fine. And I think everyone could see that they had something special going on here. So right here, El Carmen. Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham were responsible for perhaps the greatest band reboot in the history of music. In the course of just 3 albums, they were largely responsible for transforming Fleetwood Mac from a cult blues rock band to the most successful pop band of their era. So Fleetwood Mac's 3rd album was called Tusk, and it was recorded largely right here at Village Recorders in West LA in this room. This is Studio D. And this studio was made specifically for Fleetwood Mac to record, and they spent 13 months here, and their budget of over $1 million at the time was the largest ever in recording history. Stevie said that when we were locked up in Studio D for a year with the curtains and the tusks on either side of the console, it was like living in an African burial ground. It was heavy, heavy, intense, heavy. She also said that it probably weighed more on her, perhaps, than the other members of the group, because during the constant re-recording of the instrumental tracks, she didn't play an instrument, and she had nothing to do. And she jokingly compared it to being held hostage in Iran. Now, the upshot of being here, though, in the room while they were out there, was she was able to write songs, and she was able to cachet some of these songs for her upcoming solo record, Belladonna. Now, the studio expenses here got to be kind of crazy. Expensive champagne, lobster dinners every night, English beer on tap. And then, of course, there was cocaine, which wasn't part of the official budget. Otherwise, it probably would have cost $2 million to make this thing. There's one more thing I wanted to show you, and you can see this. This bathroom was made specifically for Stevie Nicks, and it still remains as it did then. Also, a little commissary here, but in here is the lounge, and this, from what I hear, is exactly the same as it was back in the Fleetwood Mac when they made it for Fleetwood Mac. Very English country, I would have to say. The album has been described as a fractured masterpiece, which I thought was great. And although it sold over 4 million copies, it was considered a flop. But that's kind of what happens when you try to follow up the best-selling album of all time up to that point, Rumours. You know, call it a masterpiece or call it career sabotage. But in my opinion, Tusk was maybe not their best record, but I definitely think it was their most interesting record. Anyways, Village Recorders right here. So in 1977, after her breakup with Lindsey Buckingham, and the money was rolling in from Rumours, Stevie decided it was time to throw down some roots, and she bought this house right here. We're in one of the oldest sections of Hollywood. We're in the Hollywood Hills above Vine Street. So this place was built in 1927 for silent film star Vilma Banky. And don't ask me who that is because I have no idea. But originally when Stevie lived here, it was painted pink. So as you can see, there's 3 levels to the house. And her sound engineer, Tom Moncrief, at the time lived in one of the apartments below right here. And they had assembled some recording equipment and had a recording studio down there. And some really important stuff came out of the studio, including the demo for Sarah, which ended up on Tusk. And it ended up being the master on Tusk, the stuff that they recorded here. And one of the neighbors mentioned to me that I was talking to that they used to see Stevie writing lyrics on the wall of the studio. So anyways, our next stop is right through the heart of Hollywood, so let's get to it. Stop Dragging My Heart Around wasn't actually a song written for Stevie Nicks. It was a bona fide Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers song that was one of the tracks that was set to appear on their upcoming album Hard Promises, which they were recording at Sound City Recorders with Jimmy Iovine. And a little backstory about Tom Petty and Stevie Nicks. They hadn't been friends for that long, but Tom Petty had written the song Insider specifically for Stevie Nicks. But after he heard her vocal on it, he fell back in love with his own song, and she could tell that he wanted the song back to sing it. And he promised to write her something else in the future, but the truth was he was uber busy with his own career right then and didn't feel he had the time to devote to it. Hang on. Okay, we're going to make a little pit stop here first. So producer Jimmy Iovine was working on Tom Petty's Hard Promises. He was also working on Stevie Nicks' Belladonna, and it was a secret that he was keeping from Tom Petty. He didn't want Tom thinking he wasn't committed totally to finishing Hard Promises. Now, it's no big secret that the Heartbreakers were Stevie Nicks' favorite rock band, and the idea of doing one of their songs really appealed to her. There was a song the Heartbreakers had been working on for weeks, and they had pretty much finished it, but nobody was terribly excited about it. But it was Jimmy Iovine that thought if he could find the right song written from almost a male point of view, that they could have a hit. And by the way, it brings us here. So the way it went down was like this. Jimmy Iovine shows up at Sound City Studios without the Heartbreakers, without Tom Petty, but with Stevie Nicks. They throw the 24-track tape up on the studio machine, and the one with Tom's vocals on it. They mute Tom's vocals and have Stevie sing the entire song. At this point, Jimmy Iovine was only interested to see if his hunch was right, and that type of song with a male point of view would be the right vehicle for Stevie Nicks. So after finishing the track, they decided to compare Stevie's vocals to Tom's by taking the faders and turning them up and down, one muted, one not. And Jimmy Iovine and engineer Shelly Ackes were almost doing it to elicit laughs. And it did for a minute, but then it became very obvious to everyone in the studio that this had real possibilities at being a duet, which brings us to the former Cherokee Studios right here. The song went on to number 3 in the charts, and on that level outdistanced anything Petty and the Heartbreakers had done up to that point, which served to somewhat piss off Petty and the Heartbreakers, who had a new album out of their own at the time, and I think it ultimately put them in a higher echelon. And for my money, this song is still the greatest duet in rock and roll history. Their friendship withstood the test of time, and as Tom Petty said, some of his best memories of Stevie Nicks were just sitting on the couch playing acoustic guitar while she sang. Anyways, right here.
It ran out for air, out in the cold, precious and cracked.
So here we are in Santa Monica, and Stevie owns a couple of homes in this area, and it has acted as her home base for quite some time right now. She still stays busy with recording and touring and with her philanthropic efforts. And to say it's been a long and winding road is, I think, putting it mildly. Stevie Nicks has had a career unlike any other. She was the first woman ever inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame twice. Once, obviously, for Fleetwood Mac, and the other with her solo work. So if you like what you've seen, please subscribe to the channel. We've got a lot of other, I would hope, cool videos and more to come. And lastly, I want to thank Stevie Nicks for making all the inspirational and great music she's done for generations to come, I would think. But anyways, for Tim, thank you. Peace out. Bye-bye.